everyone, and welcome to How Did You Show. Today I'm having a super exciting guest with me, very good friend of mine, ex-military pilot and property expert, my friend Rich Liddle. Hi, Rich.
Morning. Hello, everybody.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you, Lenka.
Oh, thank you very much for coming to the show. I'm very excited to have you as my guest today.
No, and I'm pleased to be here. Hopefully I can add a little bit of value to everybody. And yeah, I'm all yours for the next however long you want.
Amazing. I'm sure you're going to add plenty of value, as you always do, as you guys do every single day in your wonderful Blue Oak Property group as well, and other groups you do, which we're going to get to later. So yeah, I'm very excited. I'm sure you're going to add plenty of value today.
No worries.
So can you tell us a little bit about you? Who is Rich Liddle, for those who don't know?
Right. So yeah. So as Lenka said, I'm Richard Liddle. So I've been property-wise. I know this property podcast. I've been investing in property since 2003. Was my first purchase, should we say, of a property, and it was a property that I was going to live in. It was a little two-bed cottage. I still own that today, and basically it was on moving out of that cottage, which I subsequently rented, I became kind of the accidental landlord, and it was from that moment onwards I kind of saw the power of property. But before that, as like I said, I was in the military. So I joined the military in '98. I know I don't look that old. You know, it's a good moisturising regime. But
you're doing something very well.
I joined up in '98 as a helicopter pilot and started flying helicopters in 1998 for the Royal Navy. So conflict throughout Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, former Yugoslavia, every conflict that the UK has been involved in, I have been involved in.
Wow.
So it really happened in 2003. I had this house. I was deployed to Iraq at the time for what was known as Optelic, the invasion of Iraq at that time, Gulf War II, and I rented that house out. So, and I didn't know how long I was going to be away. Nobody knew how long we were going to be away. So hence I just rented this thing out. Now, I ended up coming home, 7.5 months later, and I just left it rented out. I then moved to Scotland at the time to fly search and rescue helicopters off the west coast of Scotland out of Ayr. And it was at that point that I thought, do you know what, this property game, looking at the money I was making just from that little buy-to-let, bearing in mind I had very little mortgage on it at the time, but it was cash flowing. I just thought, do you know what, let's try and do this a little bit more. So I said back in 2000, by now we were 2004, I was working in Scotland, still in the military, and I basically started looking at property as more of a professional thing rather than just little amateur. Still doing it amateur because I was still in the military, but alongside. And at that point, I jumped into buy-to-let and HMOs in Glasgow. And HMOs in quite a big scale in Glasgow. Student HMOs in the West End of Glasgow. It was a booming era. So I was doing a lot of HMOs in that time. Following that period, moved again with the military. And again, I spent the next years basically batting around the country, deployed overseas, but all the while building up alongside of my military time this property portfolio and this property career, and just advancing that and advancing it really until we get to kind of 2010. I then started moving from HMOs and buy-to-lets, which I was doing, into more the conversions and the builds. So I started doing larger things. I did the first was a derelict building, which I converted to a 14-bed all-en-suite HMO. I then did a 10-bed, and then I did 16 apartments. So it was kind of moved into the development side. But it was still that very standard stepping stone of buy-to-let, cut my teeth, move it into something a little bit more adventurous into the HMOs, move it into a little bit more adventurous, which was a development to an HMO, move it into a little bit more adventurous, which was a development into apartments. It was still that same stepping stone thing. But again, all along, still alongside my military career. And that's something I'm really trying to drive home to a lot of people with what I do, is the fact that people try and put barriers in their way and say, look, I can't do a property, I can't build this property portfolio, this property career because I'm so busy in my day-to-day job. So I've got to quit that day-to-day job in order to do property. Well, no, you don't. I always encourage people to build that property portfolio until it is self-sustaining, until it at least not replaces that income, but doubles that income. Why? Because property is a very movable beast, shall we say. And actually, unstable. Yes, they replace that. But let's say all of a sudden you've got an issue here. Coronavirus hits and everybody moves out of your HMOs. All of a sudden you've got no cash flow. But if you doubled it, actually you've got a little bit of a buffer. So Yeah, time. What I really try and emphasize to people is time. That everybody has the time. It's just how you prioritize your time. Because I've done it alongside of a deployed military career for 21 years, and I've been in property since 2003, and I've built that alongside. I only left the military last month, March 2020. I left. Prior to that, I'd done the pair of them all together. So I've only just gone full time into property. Yeah, so that's me. I'm very much passionate about both property. Property for me is all about solving problems. I'm more than happy to go into that. A lot of people say, why are you in property? And a lot of people get into property because they want to, say, replace their day job, or they've got this defined goal of what they want. And I guess because I didn't get into property for that, because I was doing it alongside and I just liked the additional income at the time, I actually enjoyed the problem solving. I enjoyed seeing problems that nobody else could solve and solving them. And that's led to, a number of massively profitable deals. So I was dealing with knotweed problems. Now, knotweed, where you are down in the south coast, it's not really an issue, but anywhere in the north, knotweed is a massive issue. And it's a very invasive plant that grows around buildings, and it actually makes properties unmortgageable. Now, years ago, nobody knew how to deal with this. And I was seeing properties that were valued at zero. Okay, literally huge buildings valued at zero because of this weed growing. Yeah, but you couldn't just cut it down. You can't just cut it down and put normal weed killer on it. There were certain ways to do it. So I dug into how we could, it originated from Australia, this weed. So I looked at how can we treat this weed. And lo and behold, I managed to pick up picked up a building, a property for just over 100,000. I treated that weed, okay, bearing in mind that it was valued technically at zero because of the weed, but I paid just over 100,000 for it. I treated the weed and then got a new valuation of that property for 350,000. So by solving the problem, I immediately created, £250,000 worth of equity.
Amazing.
By solving the problem. And that's what I love about property. So I love the problem, love to find a solution, and then have it capitalized, whether that's a vendor's problem, whether that's a physical problem with the property, whatever it may be. So yeah, that's my passion, is the problem solving. And then from there, I've got 2 kids, live with a partner, Amy, who does a lot of the health and fitness stuff, which I know you love.
My wifey.
And I've got George, who's a little terrorist, and I've got an 8-year-old daughter as well. So that's what I spend a lot of my time outside of building property. But now my new venture is Blue Oak. Blue Oak is really, for me, Blue Oak is something that is going to be different to everything else.
I mean, the topic for this show, we chose an HMO, which means a house of multiple occupancy. And I know that you have a few of those, and you are a real property expert, and you're a very, very inspirational guy. So I was hoping that you could maybe share with us a little bit of how did you get your first HMO and where did you go from there, please?
Right. So my first HMOs were, as I mentioned there when we talked about me, my first HMOs were in Glasgow. Now, that just happened to happen. I was living quite close to it. Glasgow's got 2 big universities, a really thriving kind of young professional scene. Most people think of Glasgow, actually, certainly coming from England, I'm in English, you look up at Glasgow and you don't think it's a nice place. Actually, Glasgow is a beautiful place, a beautiful city, but it has these, like any city though, I guess, it has little rough areas. It's got the very, the football orientated area. And that used to reflect down to me being an Englishman of, it's a bit of a rough city. Well, actually, it's got a beautiful area to it, beautiful universities. And we used to go there when I was working in air quite a lot to, go out on weekends, go shopping. And I noticed there was a big student population. Now, this again, we're talking back in 2007, well, 6 and 7 it was at the time. 2006 is when I took my first HMO there. And I realized that, let's do some HMOs. But they weren't HMOs as you might think now. But I cut my teeth, shall we say, in dealing with multiple tenancies. So then it was simply what are called tenement flats, 4 5-bedroom flats in a building, and I would just be putting 5 students in them. Okay, there were no rules, no regulations. You didn't have to do anything. But what that did do is it meant I kind of cut my teeth in dealing with multiple tenancies, dealing with multiple people moving in and out at different times. Now, that was my first HMO, and it was a very, very it wasn't easy to run, but it was easy to get into, shall we say. But what it showed me as well is how one property could be producing far, far more income than just a single buy-to-let. A good analogy for that, you know, it's by carving up that property and getting a lot more money from that one property than you would potentially from a single tenant. A good analogy you could say of an HMO and why it makes you more money, shall we say, is let's take a cake, okay? Let's take a cake that Costa Coffee buy. And Costa Coffee might buy their cake, okay, for £5. So they buy a whole cake for £5, but they sell each slice individually once it's been carved up for £2.50 each, okay? So ultimately, a lot more from that by carving it up. And that's what we're doing with an HMO. We're taking one property and we're carving it up into smaller segments, i.e. rooms, and ultimately, collectively, you'll earn a lot more money from that. And that's why HMOs are attractive. Yeah. Now, there's a lot of downsides, and there's a lot of pros, and there's a lot of cons with everything. We'll happily discuss those. But moving on into HMOs where we are now, HMOs are still, in principle, a fantastic investment strategy. The rules and regulations have changed considerably, and I'll touch on those now. And that's what I would say as a beginner getting into HMOs. Firstly, look at your area, look at whether you want to get into HMOs. They are very, very high cash flowing strategy, but you need to understand your area very, very well. What I mean by your area is there a demand? Is there a reason that people are going to use shared accommodation? There's a massive shortage of accommodation in the UK as a whole, okay? So wherever you are, there will be a demand for shared accommodation. It's just how big a demand that is. Are there universities? Are there hospitals close by? Are there building sites, large construction sites, large developments going on? Because all of them bring a greater demand for single accommodation. Students, single accommodation, nurses, doctors coming into hospitals to bolster the staff there. Construction sites where they'll have short-term workers coming in, all bolster HMOs. So have a little look at your areas before you ever jump into HMO. Make sure there is a demand there for HMOs. Then what I would say as beginners, understand what licensing is, HMO licensing, and understand what a thing called Article 4 is, okay? Now, Article 4 is quite simply a restriction in a town for HMOs. So all you need to do is go onto your local council's website, type in Article 4 map, and it will give you a map of where the Article 4 area is. And what I would suggest is, as a beginner, don't go looking to try and create an HMO within that map area. Okay, that's where I would go with this kind of beginner type topic. There are ways to do it within Article 4, but as a beginner, don't look in that Article 4 area because it's got a few more rules and regulations that may affect. So that's then Article 4. And then licensing is a different kettle of fish. And licensing is, you're basically looking, if it's going to be 5 or more rooms, then you require a license. Yeah, that's the big rule of thumb. It may be subtly different in your area with what's called selective licensing, but that's the general rule of thumb. And at that point, you have self-educated yourself into your area, your region about HMOs. And that's really where you need to begin. That's self-education. It's not about going to get an HMO course, not about going to do this, that, and the other, about self-education. Learn about your area, learn about your goldmine area, learn about the licensing in your areas. And at that point, you can decide whether an HMO strategy is for you or it's not for you. I would categorically say to everybody, HMO should be part of everybody's portfolio because it allows a diversification. And that's the key really with property investing, is diversify your assets and your tenant base. So we're not all single lets, we're not all HMOs, we're a little bit of each, okay? And I massively, massively like a diversified portfolio.
Right, interesting. Now, when you mentioned about the licensing, so obviously for those who are just starting out, as you said, the licensing and everything was changing, regulations were changing recently. Was it October 2018 as well when the HMOs regulations changed? Everything got much more stricter as well. From obviously, I don't know about it that much like you, but what I could suggest to the beginners out there is that if you are not sure if you need a license, just check with your local council, because because every council is also different. So there is around one standard rule for HMOs in the UK in general, but every council is different as well. So I think it maybe depends on how many they are in the area, or I don't know, but it's always better to check with the council if you're not sure if you need a license.
What I would suggest is that everybody really, when I talk about understanding your area and where you're investing, okay, now it's important that you really, really do understand your area. And a lot of people talk about due diligence of areas like that. And it's very, very key that you understand your area. When I really teach people to understand their goldmine area, I tell them to delve into the local council's plans. Now, a lot of people think, oh, I don't need to look at local council. Why is that important to me? You know, that's rubbish. Why am I even doing that? But what it does is there may be dry documents to read. They're not enjoyable reads, but you'll pick up certain bits of information. So learn to go on the council's website. And again, in the search engine, just put in HMO regulations and it will tell you categorically what is required in your area. Again, something else I encourage people to do when they're learning as new people getting into properties and learning about their areas is find out what's going on in your town, okay? Because you might not have any clue what is going on in your local town and area. And the way to do that, again, is go onto the council website and read the council's 5-year plan. And why I say that is because in that 5-year plan, it'll tell you whether they are planning to build a new rail link into the city centre. It'll tell you if they're looking to build a new multi-screen cinema, a new shopping centre, a new whatever. And by knowing that, you can forward plan and think, right, well, I know they're going to build a new rail link coming into the west side of my village or my town. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to look to do short-term accommodation there in order to facilitate the workers coming in. But what that is, it gives you a really, really detailed and broad knowledge of your area. Too many people, when you ask them, where's your goldmine area, they'll say, it's West Birmingham, it's East Birmingham. Right, tell me why. And they'll say, well, it's because it's on my doorstep. But they'll not know what's going on. Other than that, they'll not know what's going on in that area. It comes back to passion. If you're passionate about it, you've got to know it intricately. I can categorically tell you when, you know, around me, they're planning to do certain things. And I then know, is it going to be a good time to invest? Is it going to be good to do this? It might be now or it might be 12 months' time. But again, know your area intricately. And that goes with HMOs as well, because it'll tell you we haven't got an Article 4 area, but we're planning to implement Article 4 potentially in December 2020. Right. Note to self, if I want to do an HMO, I need to do it now, or I've got another rule and regulation that I'm going to have to deal with if I do it after December. So what I'm really trying to get across to beginners in property is know your goldmine area as well, intricately, not just surface level, really dig deep into what it is.
That's a great advice, absolutely great advice. Doing a real due diligence, not only in the current situation, but as you said, have a look at it, let's say 5 years ahead. That's a fantastic advice. So, Rich, you know when you said that if you, let's say, find out that in your area, you're going to have Article 4 implemented in the future, so maybe it's better to hurry up if you want to get if you want to get HMO there. Now, what would happen if you do get an HMO and then they change the rules? Then the Article 4 will kick in. Do you need to change your existing HMO? Or how does that work? I mean, if it's already...
Yeah, right. So Article 4 and licensing, it's really, really critical that you never, ever confuse the two. So let's say you have an HMO in an area and it's running fine. It's fully up to running. And then all of a sudden, the council come in and lay Article 4 on top of that area. The council say, right, well, this area is now Article 4. As long as that HMO was up and running as an HMO prior to Article 4 being brought in, then it has what are called grandfather rights. Okay, it has the ability to continue operating an HMO and not be affected by the Article 4. Okay,
right.
You can even get that in writing from the council with what's called a certificate of lawful use. Okay, but what I mean is if you've got an HMO there and then they put Article 4 in, it doesn't affect you. And by knowing that, say, as I say in this example, I said they may be going to implement Article 4, let's call it in December this year. As long as you could consciously think, right, there is still a demand in that area for HMO, so I know the demand is there. Okay, the properties all stack up, and I've found a property that may, when I've done my deal analysis on that, it stacks up as an HMO. Fantastic. So as long as I turn that into an HMO and have it operating as an HMO prior to Article 4, then there's not an issue. The key is it's got to be operating as an HMO. So you
Right.
can't just buy one and then say to the council, so we buy a property, and I've seen people get caught out by this. People will buy a property just before Article 4 implements, and they will start the refurbishment work on that. Well, at that point, you're too late. Article 4 has been implemented. You've got to have bought it, completed any refurbishment works, and put a tenant in or tenants into that property.
Right.
The tenants may only be in there for one day, okay, before Article 4 comes, but you've operating it as an HMO, and that is critical. And this is where real good, intricate understanding of the rules is important. But, don't get confused about it. It's not rocket science, HMOs. HMOs are quite simply carving up, like I said, with the cake analogy, simply carving up a property, okay, to use as separate rooms. Don't get yourself too wrapped up in the rules and the regulations. Okay, there is plenty of advice out there. People can reach out to me for advice. They reach out to anybody for advice. Don't use those as barriers to not get into HMO investing. Check the demand, know your areas, understand, and decide whether it's for you. There's many different ways to do HMOs with regards to tenant types. And again, it's something I say is understand the tenants that are going to go into that property. Are they going to be students? Are they going to be nurses, doctors working at hospitals? Are they going to be contract workers? And really have your target tenant in mind before you ever start. Me personally, I always like to give my entire HMO to companies, okay, on what are called FRI leases, fully repairing and insuring leases. Why? Because that means on a day-to-day basis, I'm not looking after the tenants. I've just handed it over to another company.
Very clever.
Yeah. So again, what I mean by that is, as a beginner, understand who's going to live in your HMO. Okay.
Amazing. So which that means obviously that comes with the due diligence, as you said, in the little earlier on. So the due diligence, it's hugely important for everything from sourcing the property to the the area, who's going to live in the area, what's going to happen in the area. So it's all a lot to do with a proper, really, real good due diligence. And as you said, the rest, it's not a rocket science, and it's no need to overcomplicate it. So of course, it sounds maybe complicated for someone who's just starting out and they don't really understand it, but it's so hugely important to understand it's not. It doesn't need to be that complicated. Well, if you love it, as we said, no?
It is. And I'll give you another little bit of a gem, which is quite kind of good advice to people, which I find that people don't really do. It's, say you're looking at HMOs, you're looking at the properties and you want to get into HMOs, but you have no concept of, is this worth the money? Like, how much should I be looking at? How much is a property? It's like how long's a piece of string? Where do we start with this? Well, learn again in your due diligence. So if you were doing buy-to-lets, you would know roughly what the highest price is in that area, what the average sale price may be in that region, whatever. So you'll know roughly the prices. Well, people then say, well, you can't do that with HMOs because they're all different, but you can understand what an HMO room is worth, okay? And I encourage everybody to learn the value of an HMO room. So both ensuite room and then a shared bathroom room. So what I mean by that is have a little look in your area for properties which have sold as HMOs, okay? Now, they may not be within half a mile, but they might be within a mile of radius of where you're looking. But what I'm saying is in your town, have a little look for HMOs that have sold. So let's say a 5-bed HMO, all en suite, sells for £250,000. So then you can put a value on that HMO ensuite room of £50,000. 250 divided by 5. So that gives you a rule of thumb that an ensuite HMO room is worth about £50,000. Then do the same with non-ensuite rooms. So let's say we have a 5-bed non-ensuite with 1 shared bathroom house, okay? And that's on the market for £150,000, okay? 150 divided by 5 is 30,000. So now I've got 2 scales, 2 what are called frames of reference. So I know a non-ensuite room in my area is worth about 30 grand. An ensuite room in my area is worth about 50 grand. Now, why that is a good bit, again, of due diligence to have stored in the back of your head, due diligence to have, is when you're looking at a property and you think, brilliant, I've got a building in front of me. that I can convert into a 5-bed all-ensuite HMO. And it's on the market for 150 grand.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to cost me 50 grand to do the work. Therefore, I bring that in at 200,000. The average cost in my area for a room is 50. Therefore, I'm manufacturing this building for 200,000. Therefore, it's a good deal. Tick. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Does that mean? Yeah?
Absolutely.
Where that would go wrong is, let's say there's a building on the market for 250,000, and I'm going to make that into a 5-bed HMO, and it's going to cost me £50,000 to do it. So therefore, we're £300,000 in. But I've already know that an ensuite room is valued in my region at 50 grand, but I'm going to spend 300 doing that. Well, it's no longer cost effective. You may as well go and buy an already converted, because you're not going to get your money back out of that property. So it enables you on the spot to look at a property, and it's that level I always talk about, being able to do fast deal analysis, fast due diligence on a property. And it's having this pre-work, this work done in your head and stored in your head that enables you to do fast on the ground due diligence on properties. And a lot of people neglect that when it comes to HMOs. They don't know what an HMO is worth. So I can categorically tell you, in my area, those figures I've just said, 50 grand for an ensuite are pretty much where we are in my area, and about 30 for a non-ensuite room. So it's just knowing that is very, very powerful.
Wow, that's a great advice. That's not only for the beginners out there, that's for anybody. That's a fantastic little trick to, how you said, now how to evaluate, how to really think what house you should go for, or you could go for, if that could work, if you could make money or your money back. That's fantastic advice. Thank you, Rich. What about, because that now this is you're talking about a property which you would look to buy and then turn into HMO. Now, what about the rent-to-rent strategy? Do you have any of those, or is there any advice for the beginners out there? Because obviously this is for property beginners. Now, not every beginner would have enough money to purchase a house. Yeah, so there's another strategy called rent to rent, which can apply to, this is, as I'm only going, a bit more about it because, it's for the beginners. So the rent to rent can apply to different strategies as well, also like service accommodation, HMO. So there's different ways of using rent to rent. So can you maybe give us a little bit of advice how beginners can start doing HMOs without having any money?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Rent to rents are a brilliant way to get into HMOs. And the reason they are so good for getting into HMOs is because it really gives you a starting step in there, as in a far, far lesser starting capital. So let's talk HMOs and rent to rent. 2 rules that every beginner should understand and should live by when it comes to rent to rent HMOs. The first one is the 6-month rule. Okay, and we'll talk about that now. So the 6-month rule is, when you do your analysis on a property, you've got to look at how much cash flow you're forecasting that's going to give you. So if you're just getting out and you've seen this property that's on a rent-to-rent basis, you work out roughly how much cash flow that's going to give you. So that's quite simply all of the rent added up that you foresee in that region, all of the rent added up, then take off that the rent to the landlord, take off that all of the bills and expenses, and what's left over is the net cash flow. That's what you're going to make as a profit. Okay. Now, that net cash flow times by 6 months. So let's, for example, call it £1,000 per month. Therefore, in 6 months, we'll have £6,000. So that property is a deal as long as I can get it on the market running for less than £6,000. And that means the refurbishment of the property, the furnishing of that property, as long as all of that can be done for less than 6 months of the net cash flow, it's a deal. That's the first rule when it comes to HMOs, rent to rent. The second rule is the 1.5 times the maximum rent. And that is, let's say we have 5-bed HMO. Again, 4 of the rooms are at £500, but 1 of the rooms is at £600. Okay, 1.5 times the maximum rent, so we've got a £600 room, is £900. So therefore, our net monthly cash flow must be equal to or more than 1.5 times the maximum room rent. Okay, so in this example, £600, 1.5 times is £900. In our example, we said we were cash flowing at £1,000 per month. Therefore, this property is a deal because the £1,000 is more than the 900.
That's
and those rules, if you stick by them doing rent-to-rent HMOs, you will always make money from them. If you don't use those rules and you just think, oh, do you know what, there's a property there for rent, it's already an HMO, I'm going to have it, and you haven't analysed it and used those two rules, you will, and I guarantee it, you will lose money.
Wow.
So by using rent to rent, it's a massively, massively powerful strategy to get into this field very, very quickly. Now, I always encourage people I work with to try and put what's called a lease option onto a rent-to-rent deal. Now, I think this goes a little bit beyond, it's not just for the beginners, but what I would say is put that word in the back of your head, lease option, and then let's maybe discuss that a different day, because by putting a lease option on a rent-to-rent deal, it actually means ultimately you could own that property. Yeah, and you're not just going to potentially hand it back in 3 years' time. So rent-to-rent, brilliant deal. Where rent-to-rent falls down is that people don't analyze them correctly. So we'll come all the way back to the beginning, which is analyzing the deal correctly. Ensure that you analyze it. Keep those two rules, 6 month rule, 1.5 times the rent in the back of your mind. And as long as they both work, you will not lose money on that HMO.
Great advice again. Fantastic. Thank you, Rich. Now, as you said, we probably shouldn't really talk about that much that particular topic yet, because it's not for beginners, but I'm hoping that maybe one day we can do a whole episode on that, because that'll be amazing. But just very quickly, I personally didn't know either that you can do lease option on the rent to HMO property, rent to HMO deal. That's fantastic. That makes me want to do it now. Yeah. I want to do some.
It's something for you to negotiate with that landlord.
Of course, yeah.
You know, it's a case of, I just prefer to the ability to one day own that property, rather than just thinking, I'm going to take this off you as rent to rent for 3 years. I'll take this off you for 3 years, but I want the option to buy that in 3 years' time at this price. And that allows you, because ultimately what rent to rent is just it's a short-term strategy as such, because if you're always handing them back in 3 years, then you've got to keep finding new properties to add to that portfolio. Otherwise, in 3 years' time, this one will get handed back. We've got to have found something else. You know, it's a stepping stone type process. So ultimately, if you're getting into rent to rent, you've got to go into it with the vision of ownership. You've got to want to own your own properties, want to build your own portfolio. There's a lot to be said for controlling properties, okay, which is what rent to rent is. But ultimately, if you want to grow a sustainable business and grow financial freedom, even though I hate that term, it is truthful that if you want to build financial freedom, you do need to build up your own asset base. Sure. And that's what adding options to something enables you to do. Otherwise, you're just going to it's like deal packaging. Deal packaging is deal packaging is not a property strategy. Deal packaging is you're a salesperson. It just so happens that the thing that you're selling is a property, but ultimately you're selling. You need to turn deal packaging. Those who deal package, you need to think, right, I'm deal packaging, but I'm going to build up that pot of income in order to purchase my own asset base, in order to grow my property portfolio. Otherwise, you'll forever just be a salesperson.
Which is a hard work as well. So deal packaging, you're doing the legwork on the ground, which is a lot of work, lots of negotiation. You need to do lots of networking, because you need to find the investor, you need to find the property, then you need to secure the amount, so the investor is happy to purchase. There's a lot of work involved in it, and as you said, if you're gonna keep doing this forever, you're just going to have to work really, really hard forever. So yeah, there's always a different way of, so same like with rent to rent, I can see what you're saying, that it's not a strategy, ideal strategy maybe forever, if you're thinking about scaling bigger, and having a bit more freedom one day.
It's a brilliant stepping stone. Like rent to rent is a stepping stone into HMO ownership. If you're doing rent to SA, I would still encourage people to want to get into SA. So it enables, by doing rent to whatever that is, that's a tool, okay, to understand the intricacies of that strategy. But ultimately, you want to be buying your own property.
Absolutely.
Then SA, because by the time you've got that, you understand the intricacies of that strategy. So you've got to view it for what it is. It's brilliant cash flow, okay, but the long-term legacy of it, you've got to then plan that as well.
Of course, because as again for the beginners out there, is the, yes, you said rent to rent. It's fine. It's great. It's a great way of making you know, some cash until you, if that's something you want to do, if you're looking to purchase properties in the future, because ultimately what the beauty of owning property is that you also get your capital growth. So with rent to rent, yeah, you get your monthly cash flow, but when you own the property, you get your monthly cash flow. But every single year, well, hopefully, if you do good due diligence, and obviously if we're not talking about market crashing or something, which obviously is not happening every year, you're also getting the capital growth on your equity, so on your property. So that's absolutely ideally that's the goal for most of the people who's going into the properties.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great advice. So you gave us some fantastic advice in regards to how to source the property. What about how to now when you do the right due diligence, you got the right property, either rent to rent or you buy the property yourself. Do you have any advice on how to fill the property with the people? Where do you look for right people? Do you need any special contracts, perhaps?
Yeah. So again, so all we're doing is rent to rent is just again we'll rent to rent or HMO. Sorry, we're simply using 5 rooms, 5 separate ASTs if that's what we're doing, or you could do the entire house on say a license agreement or management agreement. I always outsource that, so I always use local agents. Okay, so there's a lot to be said about, and again, it's where you see your business going. If you're going to use an agent, ensure you use a specialist HMO agent. Okay, not every rental agent is specialist in HMO. Sure that it's an HMO letting agent, and they'll be able to advise you. You know, it might be a student-specific HMO letting agent. It might be one who's looking for contract workers, etc. But if you're going to use an agent, again, back to due diligence, understand and look at who that agent is. If you plan to do this yourself, the majority of time now, when we are renting privately, you'll find a lot of tenants on. There is a site, spare rooms. Now, trouble is with spare rooms, it's kind of diminished over the years. It's not as good as it was, but again, it's a good one to throw an advert on and use that. Facebook Marketplace, fantastic place for finding tenants, and again, advertising your rooms. If you're going to advertise your rooms and rent them properly, ensure the photographs are done. You know, if you're going to take them on an iPhone, ensure that you are. You know, not everybody's got a professional camera. Not everybody can do that. But you can set the room up and you can dress the room correctly. Find a good angle to take the photographs. So ensure your photographs are truly, truly selling your product, because that's what you're doing. You're selling that room. You want somebody to look at that advert, or whether it be on Facebook Marketplace, Gumtree, spare rooms, and you want them to be like, wow, I want that room. You want to get them to pick up that phone to you to book a viewing. If you've got a really dimly lit, dull photograph of an unmade bed, you know, clothes on the floor or whatever that may be, it's not attractive.
They're going to skip your property and look for something nicer.
Yeah, and that's it. Make the picture attractive. And I think that's one of the biggest keys with anything is you've got to sell it. And again, make the narrative that you put on there, sell that property, sell the benefits of your property, say why it's so good, etc. So that's what you want to do. Once you start getting viewings for those properties, again, ensure that if you're self-managing, that you do those viewings and show them around the properties. But again, that is a time for you as well to get a first impression of that tenant. So yes, you want to fill the property, but you also want to fill the property with the right people. So spend that time to understand, while you're showing them the property, who that person is. Get to know them, that first impression. Have they turned up dressed like a complete scruff? Have they turned up, you know, if they're, whoever they may be, just get to know them. Because once they decide that they're going to take that room, they'll have to go through referencing. Now, referencing is a formal process, and you can outsource that. There's many different referencing agencies. But that will simply look at kind of credit checks, jobs, things like that. Don't get me wrong, there's many people who pass credit checks, have good jobs, etc., who are just awful tenants, who are scruffy, who are messy, who wouldn't respect and look after your property. That's down to you during that view, and just a look at the person, get to know them. You know, I just spend 5 minutes with them, but talk to them, engage in conversation. Are they, do you get the impression that they're going to have zero respect for your property? If that's the case, I would highly recommend that you probably don't take them. So what I'm getting at there is, if you're going to self-manage it, make sure the pictures sell. The pictures and the narrative sell what you're really sell the property itself. Ensure that you do the viewings yourself, or if you're not doing them yourself, and whoever does them, ensure that that person speaks to and gets to know the tenant, and do your referencing correctly, okay? Because to get 5 good tenants in that property, okay, they'll then hopefully stay for the long term. If you get 4 good tenants in one that's past referencing, but actually is a bit of a messy person, has no respect for the property, what will happen? It'll scare the other 4 away, and all that'll happen is those other 4 will move out as soon as their tenancy agreements have expired. So that'd be my biggest bit of advice if you're going to start self-renting yourself. Moving forward from there, the management of the property, okay, ensure that you have good systems in place, whether that simply be WhatsApp groups for all of the tenants, so you've got the communication. Majority of systems, when people talk about systems, as long as you've got good communication, that gets rid of 90% of problems. If you're communicating effectively, actually you'll get rid of 90% of problems. So little things like that, a WhatsApp group, which is for urgent pieces of information, to relay whatever, to visit the property, to keep in touch and keep communications with those tenants, will go a long, long way to ensuring that house runs smoothly.
Amazing. That's another fantastic advice. Now, can I just add to it? I heard, because obviously I don't have HMOs. It's just something from what I'm learning, by talking to people, is that when you're also managing your property, it's handy if you are the one who goes, let's say, in there once a week and clean the communal areas, for example. The reason for that is that you're seeing yourself the state of the property, how they're treating your property, and mainly things like condensation and mold, because obviously when you have your tenant, you can't really no matter how much you would speak to them, you can't ever get guaranteed that they will be opening the windows often enough, and the filter property is basically really, really important for you to see as well how the property looks like. So it's just a little tip, especially in the beginning, if you're self-managing, if you're the one who keep an eye on the communal areas, especially in the beginning, if you want to save some money, perhaps it's an extra bonus is that you see the state of the properties in there.
100%. Even if it's not for the cleaning, the regular inspections are important, not just for kind of the condensation, the treatment of the property, but also, again, nothing will shock me with regards to tenants, but I've been into properties where, because ultimately with an HMO, you as the landlord, or you're picking up the bills, so you're paying the bills. And I've been into many, many HMOs where they'll have the heating on full blast, but they'll have all the windows open. Okay, so it's just that. Go in there. So if you're doing regular inspections, you can see that. But again, a lot of that is down to re-education. So quite simply, if I go in and I see that, I'll simply say to them, guys, would you mind? Here's the thermostat. This is how it works. This is what you need to do. Okay. There's ways to alleviate that. You can put in electronic thermostats, Hive type systems where they're remote. But again, if you just educate them, do you mind if it's cool, just turn that down and keep your windows closed? Usually communication, good level of communication. You've found the problem. Like I've said at the beginning, I love to solve problems. You've found the problem, you know the solution, you've communicated the solution, and it won't happen again.
Fantastic. Hopefully, exactly. I was about to say that because it's a people's business, you're always going to have different, not everybody's always the way how you dreamed about, you're always going to get your ideals attendance. Well, hopefully, yes, but you can't guarantee that when you're going into this game, because it's a people's business and you just never know what characters you get. As you said, the only thing you can do is to try to get as prepared as possible, do due diligence, go with your gut feeling, etc., etc. But then obviously it comes with risks as well. Of course it does. You can't just, it's not everything's just pink glasses, isn't it? You have to be ready for anything really, but hopefully as you said, with the right communication, with the right procedures, with the right system in place, hopefully you will avoid any what would we call it? Any what?
Any massive shocks, at least.
Any massive shocks, exactly. Because of course that people, you don't want to be thinking negatively as well. Like most of the people are genuinely nice. They just want to live in a lovely place. So yeah, you can't put everybody in the same bag.
Exactly. So true.
Exactly. Okay, so now we covered how you're going to find a property, how you're going to fill the property, now how you maintain the property. Is there anything else you think that beginners should know when you're running HMO? Is there any other like a golden tips from Rich Liddle for like while you already have?
I think what I would say is when you're running them, okay, before you ever bring in an agent or bring in somebody else to do it, ensure that you have done it yourself, okay, so you understand the process.
Great.
What I would,
as well.
looking at this as a business, and you're looking at taking on 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 HMOs, whether that be as rent-to-rent or whether that be owned, then you do need to start looking at outsourcing that management. Now, whether that be a local agent that you trust, that's fine, but I do encourage people to do it themselves initially so you can understand the pitfalls, the downfalls, where, you know, those sort of things. But I think with HMOs, I think if people did a few things very well, they would make their HMOs far, far more successful. First one, like I said, my golden tip would always be the due diligence. Due diligence on the area, due diligence on the property themselves, whether that be rent to rent or whether that be to own. When it comes to both of those, when it comes to rent to rent, learn your 2 rules and understand those 2 rules, okay, how they impact that property. If it doesn't fit in those 2 rules, but you think it's a beautiful property, I want it, but it doesn't fit in those 2 rules, then do not take it as an HMO. This property game is fact-based, not emotional-based, okay? The facts, the rules say that it's not a deal. Therefore, it's not a deal. No matter how beautiful it is, no matter what it looks like, if it doesn't fit the rules, do not take it. That'd be the second one. The third one, really, my key for all of this is, sorry, I'll do 4. Third one is understand the rules and the regulations of your area. Okay, so just that due diligence. The last one is good communication. Communicate with your tenants, okay? Communicate with them once you've got them in there. If you start using agents, keep good communication with those agents. Even if when I have agents running my properties, I maintain a kind of weekly communication at least with them, and I'll still go and view my properties. Why? Because I also want to ensure that the agent is doing the job correctly. Because I've asked them to do it, but I've also got to check that they are doing it. So that would be kind of, if you do those 4 things, HMOs will always be a fantastic, fantastic property strategy.
Amazing. That's a great advice as well. That's been like you've just been giving a golden nuggets all the way through. Amazing. I'm sure everybody will find this really useful. Thank you, Rich. Now, do you have, in regards to, because obviously we covered, you know, how to get it, how to occupy the property, how to maintain the property once you have it. Now, when we mentioned before the mindset, do you have any books or any documentaries or anything for the beginners to watch if they want to get into the right mindset with the properties? Is there anything you can maybe give advice on that now as well?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite books with regards to anything with regarding property is a book by Darren Hardy called The Compound Effect. And I know I recently read it, Lenka, but it's a very old book. Oh, well, it's not a very old book. It's quite an old book, actually. It's been around a long, long time. But it's got, he communicates some key lessons very, very well with regards to positive habits in there, the power of compounding, because a lot of people within the property sphere want overnight results because they've been sold this financial dream, or they've got this financial dream. But results don't come overnight. Yeah, a tree does not, a tree, you don't plant a seed and come back the next day and expect to see a tree. You've got to plant that seed, you've got to nurture it. Like the property business, you've got to nurture it, you've got to put the time and effort in, but the roots are growing all along. Then all of a sudden, that's at one point, once you've grown those roots, the compound effect will take hold and the tree will grow at a huge rate. So that book is a fantastic book, The Compound Effect, and that's applicable to life in general, not just property. But you can take the lessons in that and definitely relay them to property. And that's probably my biggest one for mindset that I would give you. A lot of mindset is about being able to overcome barriers and overcome fears. If you can overcome fears and overcome barriers, then actually it puts your mind in a frame that says nothing is impossible. The majority of barriers are fears. Fear of what? Fear of failure, fear of being judged, fear of what others may think. So whatever those fears are, whatever those barriers are, identify the barriers, look at them, okay, and then realize or look at each barrier in turn. If it's a fear of failure, right? Why am I scared of failure? Okay, how am I going to get over that? So I then look at that, and then I look at every aspect of doing the task, okay, to ensure it will never fail. I'll then come back to the barrier. I'll be like, oh, I'm no longer scared. Fear of failure is no longer there. Barrier's gone. And by doing that with your mindset in whatever you do, it stops you putting barriers in your way, which will ultimately stop you doing the task that's going to take you to success.
Amazing. You are very, very inspirational. I actually consider you as my mentor. I don't think I ever told you that, but you really are. You really are. And
Oh,
yeah, you got a great, great attitude towards. Is that correct? Towards mindset? No, that's not correct, doesn't it? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it is. And that's right. You've got to have an attitude towards it. You've got to view. You've got to look at those barriers. It's by identifying those barriers, by firstly being honest with yourself, and a lot of that is just being honest with yourself and saying, "Why aren't I doing this?" And it's be like, "I've put a barrier in the way." Right? What's the barrier? The first step is identifying it. It's like the first step to, if you're an addict or anything like that, they say the first step is admitting it. So admitting you're an addict, admit that you've put a barrier in the way that's going to stop you achieving this task. Once you've admitted you've put a barrier in the way, then you can look at what the barrier is. And at that point, you can take action to get rid of it. I always question initially why you're getting into property. And I think it's a question everybody should ask themselves is, are you doing this purely for a financial reason? Okay, because if it's purely for, I want the money and I've been told that property can produce this money for me, potentially look at your reasonings for being there, because you've got to be passionate about the medium that is going to bring you the money. The medium that is going to bring you the money is the property. If you're not physically passionate about property, you will never, ever make this business succeed. So have a quick little, have a think about yourself. Am I passionate about this? Now, you may not be passionate about property. I'm not passionate about refurbs. Freaking hate them. I'm not the person to go out and do refurbs but I know that. So I've identified that as my weakness. I'm passionate about other areas of the property business. So what I do is I bring in the right people, the right teams to do that, to ensure that at every one of these points, from the refurb, the conveyancing, the furnishings, the lettings, those individuals, they're all passionate about their own little spoke of the wheel. I'm sitting in the middle and I'm passionate about running those spokes. That's my passion. My passion is running it. So what I'm getting at is have a question yourselves about the passion. You've got to be passionate about property. You've got to be passionate about the medium that is going to bring you the money. And the reason I say that is because if you're not passionate about it, think what you are passionate about. Because if you put the amount of time, effort into whatever you're passionate about, as you need to make a property business succeed, what you put that amount of time and effort and passion into that, you will make that succeed. Okay. And you've got to be passionate about this game about property if you want to make it succeed. It doesn't have to be all of property. It might only be one or two little spheres, but then you've got to identify the areas that you're not passionate about and then use the relevant people around you, find those teams, find those relationships, and find those people who are passionate about those areas to work with as one whole.
Yeah, that's a really great advice. For those who's listening, for example, to this episode for the first time, the previous episodes I recorded for this podcast, every single person was making a huge point about be passionate, make sure you're passionate about it, and it just shows, doesn't it, that I just want to make a massive point to it as well with you, is that many people, they think they get this a dream soul that go for this course and then you're going to get that much passive income, for example, a month. But it's not like that as such, and that's obviously a different topic. We could go hours and hours and hours about this one, isn't it? But it's a huge thing that everybody really should realize. Do you actually want to do this? Is that actually something you want to do? And if that's something you don't want to do, find something you want to do. It's the same mindset, same principles, same way of thinking. You still need to train your brain and train your mindset to become successful, but find whatever you're passionate about and you want to do. So, Rich, can you tell us more about your exciting Blue Oak and all the projects you're starting out with your Blue Oak community?
Yeah, absolutely, Lenka. So we've got Blue Oak. Hopefully, all your listeners will be part of Blue Oak. If you're not, please do go to our main Facebook group, which is Blue Oak Property Network. And what we're doing is we've just set out with Blue Oak to try and disrupt many spaces. We want to become a brand. We want Blue Oak to become a brand that kind of transcends many, many different industries, from health and fitness, from personal development, from mindset growth. And really, it's about our three core values, which are open, honest, and ethical. And we feel if we bring those to whatever business we go into, okay, we will ultimately make it a success. And if we can relay that to you guys as well, and hopefully you bring open, honest, and ethical values to your business, you will always make it a success as well. So it's just an open platform of shared information. We want to provide ultimate solutions for you guys to succeed. No ulterior motives, no selling. We just want to develop you all as individuals. Alongside of that, we've realized that actually in the property space, mindset, beliefs, vision is huge, and actually personal growth. And so hence we set up Peak Performance, which is another group, Peak Performance by Blue Oak, where we look to instill marginal gains in every single one of you through structured behaviors in order to gain peak performance. If you can improve, okay, and if we can give you some guided teachings to improve you by literally 1/10 of 1%, okay, 1/10 of 1% every single day, okay, in 10 days, you'll be 1% better. And you might think, actually, that's not a lot. You won't notice the difference. And to be honest, you probably won't notice the difference. But from then 100 days, you will be 10% better as an individual in the tasks that you're doing, in the work that you're doing, in your diet, your fitness, whatever it may be. So that's what we're doing with Peak Performance, to grow every individual to be better as people, better as individuals, and better as humans, because ultimately that will grow your business. And that's Blue Oak, really. We want to transcend. We want to take us as Blue Oak. We want to bring you all with us on this ride. And as I say, we are just an open, honest, and ethical community. So please, if you're not part of any of the Blue Oak groups, go and join Blue Oak Property Network, Peak Performance by Blue Oak, Health and Fitness by Blue Oak. Get on them all. Get involved, and as I say, we hold monthly events, monthly meetups, full days worth of teaching and education, which are just great community atmosphere.
It's absolutely fantastic. And they were saying that and also what you have, it's a Blue Oak book club now as well. You guys are just growing. Yeah. It's amazing. And you only started, was it October 2019?
Yeah, so Blue Oak itself started in October 2019, but I think our exponential growth, so we're recording this now in April 2020. I think our growth is really tantamount to our beliefs of open, honest, and ethical, just doing things right, okay? Treating people correctly, and not just as a sales funnel or a sales pitch. We're treating people correctly. And at the core, as I say, it's ultimate solutions for you guys to succeed, for everybody that we deal with to succeed, because we want everybody to succeed, not just ourselves, because then the payback to us will be far, far greater than potentially a short-term monetary payback.
Of course. The thing is that what I love about you guys is that you always just make sure that people understands if they are passionate about what they're saying they are passionate, because if they are not passionate about certain things, then they perhaps wasting their time, your time, or they will be wasting their money, or it's just hugely important. And I love that, guys, but you always make sure that whoever you helping, you make sure that this is what they want. Truly, This is what they want. Yeah.
Passion is vital, really. You've got to be passionate about whatever it is you're doing, because if you're not, whenever you hit a hurdle, whenever you hit a hard time, a bad time, a problem, if you're not passionate about it, you will never get over that hurdle. And it'll be that hurdle that actually is the point that you give up if you're not passionate about it. You'll get to the hurdle, you get to the problem, you'll be like, oh, sorry, I can't be bothered.
Yeah.
About it, there will not be a single hurdle, a single problem, or anything that can get in your way, because you have the passion to succeed at whatever it is. So those hurdles do not matter then.
Amazing. Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Rich. Like, as I said, that we're going to put the links for the Blue Oak community somewhere below. I'm still learning. I still don't know where to point. I still don't know where to point. Somewhere there will be comment boxes. We're going to put the links for those who are not in the community yet, because definitely, guys, you should get on there. I can't get enough. I'm addicted to Blue Oak. I'm in. I'm so fully in. It's a real addiction. Love the people. Love everything you guys do.
For the Blue Oak in.
Blue oak. I'll do the tree.
Yeah. Good tree.
Okay, and just I have one more question, literally just one more question, because after everything what we covered, for those who don't like reading, I always ask that question to everybody. Do you have any, for those who just want to put something on the TV and they want to be a bit educational about mindset or about properties, do you have anything to recommend on the TV as a TV show or TV or movie or anything? Something what Rich Liddle would recommend, that if you want to watch something really cool, watch that.
If you want to watch something what I would consider really interesting, it's the documentary. There's I've probably got two actually. Can I give you two?
Yeah, of course, please do.
First one, the documentary about Warren Buffett called Being Warren Buffett. Okay, fascinating documentary. For those people who don't know who Warren Buffett is, he's about 87 years old now. He's no longer the richest person in the world. I think he's third richest person in the world. But the man still lives in the same house that he bought when he was in the 1960s. He still drives the same car that he bought in the 70s. Yet he's the third richest man in the world through the ability of, well, it's through compound interest, but a very, very shrewd investor. He's an investor in the stock markets, not necessarily property. But his mindset into how he analyzes things, how he goes about and deals with them is fascinating. Money for him is not the driving force. He views money as a scorecard. It's numbers on a screen if he is successful or not. He does not care about looking flashy or anything like that. I say the bloke's 87 years old. But what is very, very interesting is how passionate he is. Because if he wasn't passionate, he wouldn't still be working every single day in his office at 87 years old. The man's got more money than you could ever know what to do with, yet his passion shines through. So becoming Warren Buffett is a fantastic one. The second one, again, about mindset and learning yourself. So I view mindset above potentially property. But so the other one I would say is the Netflix documentary called I Am Not Your Guru, which is about Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins, yeah.
Again, that is about a 6-day program that he runs called Date with Destiny. Now, I've been on Date with Destiny with Tony Robbins.
Have you?
Yeah, so I did it in Australia in 2016, and I initially thought, is this for me before I went? And it was a good friend of mine said, come on, come with me, come along. It was out of this world. It was unbelievable. The man is an absolute machine when it comes to speaking. No sales pictures, no selling. He will deliver for 12 hours a day, every day. It is relentless, but it is unbelievable content. And some of it is, you might think it's a bit woo-woo, a bit like too much, doesn't fit with what I want at all. And don't get me wrong, some of it is. But if you can take one or two little nuggets from that, little gems, and that's what I always say with books or documentaries or anything, as long as I can walk away with only one or two golden nuggets, then I'm content. I don't need to be educated from start to finish. I'll read a book, I'll watch a documentary, but as long as I can take one or two golden nuggets away from it, I will. And I think if you watch that I'm Not Your Guru with Tony Robbins, every single person listening to this or watching this will be able to take away one or two golden nuggets.
Fantastic. Amazing. So you're giving us a golden nuggets about golden nuggets.
Yeah. Let's compound that gold.
Yeah. It's like pass the parcel.
Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, Rich, that was absolutely fantastic episode. Fantastic having you today. I'm sure that everybody will find a lot of value in this. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge, your experience, your enthusiasm. As always, as I said, that I consider you my mentor. You are a good friend. You are great in what you do. You're always there to help people. So yeah, thank you very much for having me in the community.
My pleasure, Lenka. It's been great.
Amazing. Right, so we're just going to wrap it up here today. So again, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll see you all here again, and see you hopefully as well in my show again in the future. Hopefully we might cover a different topic one day. Who knows?
Would love to, Lenka.
That'll be amazing. Well, so again, thank you very much, and have a fantastic day, everybody. Thank you, Rich, again.
Bye.
For this show, we chose an HMOs, which is for the beginners out there. It's called House of Multiple. I'm gonna have to cut that one out.